welcome to Comic Books and You. Today we're finishing up Unstoppable Doom Patrol with issue 7 of 6. This is actually a better issue than the previous one. It actually is a lot tighter. It has a beginning and end and something in the middle that resembles an actual story. As such, it does what it's supposed to do. I was going to say a final part of this, but this is basically being set up to try to get a series renewal. So maybe not the best possible ending, but it's something. Dude, something to start with, and hopefully something we can learn from together. So throughout this story, our characters are going to be mainly the standard Doom Patrol that we've seen in previous issues, but we do have a few more characters that we have to some more focus on compared to the previous issues. Main one being the Eternal Flame or the Candlemaker. Basically, General Immortus merged with one of Dorothy's imaginary friend, the Candlemaker, because he wants to destroy the world. Okay, we don't know why he wants to destroy the world. We don't understand how he's going to destroy the world. He's supposed to be, the embodiment of nuclear war or something like that. It doesn't quite fit. And Immortus never seemed to be the kind to, want to destroy the world, more maybe rule it or profit from it. It just sounds really odd. The good news is, at least, unlike General Immortus, who's just a weak old man, the Candlemaker and Eternal Flame is extremely overpowered and capable of facing off with all of our heroes, which is much more interesting, at least as a final villain in an arc. We get more insight into the new chief, Crazy Jane, and we do see a few different personalities of Crazy Jane in this particular issue, which is interesting. But what we don't have is the different personalities getting into it with one another, because the chief is always the top personality during this entire series. And from what I understand, at this point in time in the universe, we add a bit of a potential conflicts between Crazy Jane and the chief personalities in issue, the one with the Psych Val. And it was fairly interesting there. It brought up something that could be nice, but this never resolves and never goes anywhere. And outside of Flit is a taxi, after that, she's not that useful in the story in terms of how she performs in combat or how she performs in fighting the different villains. So we get more details on the quiz as well. So it's the Japanese girl we saw in issue 2 that was brought in throughout a portal. That's who the quiz is. It makes perfect sense because it's perfectly expected as well. She has some sort of moral dilemma and decides to help out after Crazy Jane talks to her, but we don't get much more out of that. Apparently, she's also linked to a painting or something like that. Once again, not something that's explained. Unless you've read everything, you wouldn't really understand it. But here, we're also dealing with a villain with a really nasty power set. But, of course, since it's a woman, they're turning her into a misunderstood character or a hero, because that's just how it is nowadays in comics. We do get a great start to this books as we get an explanation of who the Candlemaker is, with General Immortus being merged with him. I'm not a huge fan of the Oppenheimer quote at the start because it's tried and trite, but overall, it explains where the character comes from and why Immortus would be interested in meeting up with him, basically. So that one page is actually a great start for the book. Afterwards, things really go up and down. Robotman, the real chief, and not Constantine, are facing the evil ones, Drew, Mr. Mala, and the Frame. And we see here Mala doing the only thing he does in the entire issue, as the Immortal Flame is gaining his powers, since just being resurrected is not enough to bring him back to full force. So Mala has to cover him for a little while Robotman calls the rest of the Doom Patrol to try to get some help. Unfortunately, they're still fighting the Brotherhood of Evil, or whatever they're called at the point, and they can't really go and help out Robotman quickly, because, they still are fighting just about every meta-human that is opposed to them. In order to save the day, the chief teams up with the other two main Doom Patroller. Elasti-Woman just makes herself really, really tiny, while Larry and the Chief are distracting Quiz. And as Elasti-Woman gets right underneath the Quiz, she knocks her out with a single punch, which works perfectly fine once again. After that's done, Larry uses his power to link the mind of the Chief and the Quiz in order for the two characters to have a quick chat. The chat takes place in the underground, which is basically the maze in the mind of the Chief, where all the personalities are interacting. They have a talk with Sachiko, and they convince her to help them out in defeating General Immortus. While that's going on, Not Constantine is writing a bunch of sigils on Robotman so we can bypass the magical protections that Immortus / Candlemaker has. And Larry convinces Mento to actually unleash his telepathic powers so he can, start limiting the actions of the rest of the Brotherhood. Mento doesn't quite want to do that because he doesn't want to be in full control of his powers again, because that would potentially cause them to go haywire again and try to start being mean again, but that's something for a later time. Drew manages to properly merge Immortus and the Eternal Flame together, and Robotman is, even with the magic sigils, would not be able to really do a whole lot. The rest of our heroes show up as backup through a portal created by Flit, which is one of the alternate personalities. Immortus does start by trying to destroy the entire team. He's actually pretty good at it. But the Quiz and Mento basically team up as Mento blocks the Immortal Flame's imagination, so he can't think of superpowers that the Quiz can't have. That's a smart thing to do, I say. And as this is going on, all of the other heroes combine their strength and powers in order to fight the Eternal Flame. Here we have Elasti-Woman chucking Robotman into a mighty punch. That's actually a pretty cool thing here. And the Quiz opens a gate into the Bleed, which is an alternate dimension, and tosses Immortus into it. Whee! Doesn't look very comfortable for our villain. The Quiz runs off, and the rest of the patrol starts patching up their wound. They want to bury Dorothy back, which is a smart thing to do. Drew and Mala just, walk out because that's what villains do when they're in a fight. And suddenly, Peacemaker shows up with an army of not Sentinels, because that was a thread that was started in the previous issues. So we kind of have to try to resolve it. Degenerate decides to fight them off since he was already supposed to go to prison, so he doesn't care if he gets arrested. Beast Girl uses her power to make him even more mad and even more angry, to become even bigger and even meaner. Not a huge fan of that, but that's how his power works, just like the Hulk. Not super imaginative. The rest of our heroes teleport out of the way, thanks to Flit. And this is basically how the story ends. Or is it? Because the Candlemaker is in the Bleed, and then he meets with the Batwoman, who laughs. Because the strategy is, as with almost everything in the mainstream, put a chick in it, make her gay, make it lame. And this is what we see through most of this particular series. I mean, Robotman is your titular character in Doom Patrol. He's literally the person people gravitate towards and enjoy watching and seeing. And he's been sidelined through most of this, even though he has his own book, more or less with Larry. So at least there's that. But everything else that's being included is very, very feminized. A lot of feminine energy throughout this. It's the Quiz that defeats the bad guy. Is that what makes this series bad or this book bad? No, there's quite a few issues here that we have to address and we have to discuss. But this is one of the things that I see in there that partially is to blame for what we have in this series. This is a cover that really reminds me of the school covers with a terribly silly over-the-top tagline at the bottom. I mean, if you've looked at old Teen Titans books, they love to have those kind of lines there. It does have that retro feel to it as well, with the look of how it is. It doesn't have much to do with what's going on in the book itself, outside of having the same artist as the interiors, which is always a great thing. It's pretty fun to look at, and it's pretty eye-catching. All in all, this is probably one of the better covers in this entire series, if we, of course, exclude some of the variant covers, which were really cool. The DC floppy, nothing else to expect from it. Honestly, maybe I should start just buying trades like everybody else does, it seems. In the book itself, we get 3 pages of ad for Return of Superman 30th Anniversary Special. I didn't get that. $15 for that book sounds like a bit expensive. I mean, it could be fun. I'll see if anybody talks about it, if it's interesting enough to read. But the ad itself looks really good. That 2-pager, as an example, looks really great. The other page that I had shown in the previous video, as did different covers for the upcoming book. That's a great ad overall. We get Detective Comic 1076, Batman Outlaw, because another event is always what we need. We just ended Batman Gotham Wars, so we need to jump into another Batman event where Gotham City is under siege. Again, my care meter for Batman in general is already low. This just doesn't move the needle at all. We get Aquaman in the Lost Kingdom tie-in comic. At least it's a tie-in comic, unlike what we had for Blue Beetle, which was a bunch of Blue Beetle covers on non-Blue Beetle books to try to promote the upcoming movie. Here we have an actual comic linking to the movie, even though it doesn't look like Jason Momoa at all. At some point, we might even be wondering here if the book will sell more than the tickets to the movie, because it really doesn't look good. And not just for Aquaman, it doesn't look good for superhero movies in general going into the next year. We get DC Kodansha manga stories, because manga is eating their lunch. They want to try to launch DC books. I've seen Justice Buster, or at least the start of it, in one of the Brave and the Bold. Kamen Rider Batman, if you want to talk about it that way. I have no idea what that Joker thing is. And Superman Meshi, because Superman likes eating food. I'm not sure that one looks super interesting. You do have decent artists, decent authors working on this, but I am not 100% sure this will move the needle a whole lot. I really love that we see a whole lot of different metahumans using their powers in this issue. We really have a wide variety of things, even though it's mostly concentrated on our main Doom Patrollers. We even see Flex Mantelo do something in this panel. Surprisingly enough, they have a manly man do something. This is also an extremely action-heavy issue. Well, especially when you compare it to the issues 2 through 5. It really showcases what the artist can do and what he understands as far as movement, physics, and everything. The fight scenes, however, are not super exciting because they're generally one panel, because they don't have the time with how the book is edited and how the book is set up to let those fight scenes grow and let those fight scenes move. So there's pluses and minuses in that column as well. Elasti-Woman does look great throughout this entire issue. It's really nice to see her grow, shrink, do all of those things. And it's an easy thing to do on paper, but it's not always easy to draw someone that's much bigger while everybody is much smaller when you're dealing with with perspective and with just characters' proportions. The teleportation scenes also looks pretty fun and exciting with all the characters coming out of it, even though the vast majority of what we see here in the teleportation doesn't end up doing anything during the actual fight scene. It's a bit unfortunate, like most of the things in this particular series. The idea behind it is good. The execution is subpar, and how it's paced, well, basically makes the whole thing fall apart. Really not a fan of the Peace Hammer robots. I mean, if you have something exciting to build next time, do it rather than just trying to rip off the X-Men. I just finished reading DC Mechs. That was a bit fun. They had exciting mech design. The story itself was rather trash, but they could have benefited from looking at those in order to design those robots. Peacemaker himself looks really terrible in this. Same with Mala. Drew doesn't look really exciting. The Eternal Flame has a look to him, but is not super cool either. Here we have a cool Peacemaker, cool Mala. That's what we really wanted to see. not what the artist was able to deliver, but it's really not his style of character if we look at everything else that's in this series. Panel work here is quite fun. We've got dynamic angles, we've got nice cuts, we've got bleeding panels. Here it's really cool to have the zoom in on Elasti-Woman. So as I keep saying here, the artist know what he's doing. The author doesn't seem to know how to deliver on it. And the editor screwed the pooch from the start. This is really not as terrible as the previous issue. At least we really have a start, a backstory for our bad guy, maybe a decent fight scene or two, and the necessary trappings to have a good book. There's a few things that are annoying, however. Robotman being a chump is a thing that's ongoing in this entire series, and not a thing that's in everything else, though, because he was instrumental in Night Terrors, as an example. We get a lot of women power, and that's something that's been discussed long and wide long ago, and I'm not sure it's something that's going to improve over time either, unless people actually take to art some of the lessons that were given in the recent Panderverse episode of South Park. Another thing that's a bit annoying here is really that our heroes have very little to do in this one. Mento's a terrible person, and even though he's trying to redeem himself and do good, he's still not the best person to have around. The Quiz is a villain that is redeeming herself, which is a trope that I think is really, really overused. Would the rest of the Doom Patrol be useful in this whole story? Probably not. Really, the only, two Doom Patrollers that do a whole lot is Robotman and Elasti-Woman. Robotman basically having a wharf role and getting chumped on, and Elasti-Woman doing everything. The Chief is somewhat important because of her powers to link minds, but even that is not critical. Larry really doesn't do much. Beast Girl is absent. Truly important bits of this story. Same with Degenerate. The Flex Force is completely forgotten. The rest of the magic dorks are not present. We see not Constantine, but he's absolutely useless as well. His magic abilities don't matter. So this is a bit weak when we think of a story and the themes being told here. Another thing that keeps coming up, why did the brain have to die? Did the brain of the brain contain the wax that General Immortus needed? I mean, in the end, the brain would probably have gone with the plan Immortus was doing if the plan was to destroy the Doom Patrol. Was he worried that the brain would try to take over and be the one to merge with the Immortal Flame? I honestly don't know here. It makes very little sense, and it makes even less sense that Mala would be following along with this. Drew would be following along with this. Most of the villains, I'm not sure they'd be willing to, destroy the entire world. This is a whole mess of teams here, and no motivation for any of the characters involved makes sense. With Peacemaker showing up at the end, it's basically, we have that plot line and we can't really resolve it normally, so let's just throw him in and let's hope for the best that people are like, okay, cool, Degenerate's gonna do something. It really makes no sense in the end. But at least there's a conclusion. It's not super solid. There's no super interesting team to talk about. No ongoing arc, no character growth, no discussions that we need to have in regards to the morality of what some of the characters are doing. You have a very basic story, and it starts and it ends. And actually, in all honesty, it starts and it ends in 2 volumes, volumes 6 and 7. The first 5 are pretty much pointless to this entire series. I'll maybe do a video discussing the problems with this series. I'm not sure if it'd be worth it, but it's something that I might have in the cards. When we read this book, we basically see that it's 2 issues crammed into 1. The previous one was 3 issues crammed into 1, so it's a little bit better paced from the get-go. We really have 1 issue which should have been Robotman and the Candlemaker fighting with the backup of not Constantine and the old chief, while the Doom Patrol is fighting in the compound, trying to get Quiz to work on their side while getting rid of the Legion of Doom, or whatever they're called at this point in time. Issue 2 would have ended or began here with the Doom Patrol bursting into the cemetery and fighting Candlemaker, while the quiz is having some form of breakdown or something like that to make sure that she will work with the heroes to resolve the problem. We'd even have a little bit more time to have Peacemaker show up and maybe do something interesting. But really, they had to cram it into a single book. So things ended poorly. So out of a 7-book series, we needed to have an extra 3 books. So 10 books in total. That starts being a little bit weird, and we've already discussed that Animal, Vegetable, Mineral Girl should have had her own book for her introduction. So we're at 11 books. Maybe if that had been a 12-book series instead of a 6-book miniseries, it would have worked. Here, I'm not sure what editors are doing at DC, looking at a thing like this and letting it go through, because that's the main issue here. The writer doesn't know how to pace his work and doesn't know how to write interesting stories around the characters. They're decent at writing characters, but not at giving them teams or giving them things that are important and that gives us some meaning to reading them. That's really where this book falters quite a bit. This is not a good Doom Patrol series. People really disregard Volume 3 with the new team that started in the early 2000s, but overall it was a much more interesting series than this one, at least for the first 12 issues. So there was character dynamics, there were conflicts, the characters were trying to grow, there were a few teams being discussed and being researched, so something was going on, but this particular series didn't catch on. We also have a lot of people who dislike the very recent Gabriel Ba series of the Doom Patrol. The bits and pieces I've read of it were also not that great. So it's a bit sad for the Doom Patrol how many bad series they've had compared to good series. Am I still excited for another Doom Patrol series at this point? Well, if they keep the same artist, but get a new writer and definitely fire the editor that they had on this one, and make sure the line director that was running this particular book is laughed out of the building, and get someone to, make sure the stories have a point, yeah, sure, that'll be a good idea. I mean, I still like the Doom Patrol. I love the concept of it. I like the early books that I've read. I like the Volume 3 that I've gone through. I like everything about the Doom Patrol in terms of the principle of it. But like I've been saying, they haven't had that many really great runs to speak of. This is one of those cases where you might have some people saying things like, buy it or we won't get more Doom Patrol in the future. Well, if that's the kind of Doom Patrol we'll be getting in the future, I'm not sure it's actually worth buying and giving the money to DC for it. This is the kind of thing that would need to be scrapped and get someone competent to work on this series in the future. Like I said, the artist is doing a decent enough job, but everything else about this book is really subpar. I hope you guys enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you for listening to me to speak to you guys about this particular series. I will see you guys later. Keep on reading comics, keep on enjoying them. I'll keep analyzing them, and I'll see you guys later. Bye-bye.